everybody, I'm Brent. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. I'm really honored to be doing this tonight. First time I've done it. I'm a little nervous. I've been sober since July 13th of 2018. I was born in Kentucky, in Lexington, Kentucky in 1967. I grew up idolizing my dad. My life was, from the get-go, I felt great as a little kid. I felt loved by my mom and dad, and everything was going really, really good. Things took a turn for me and got different, and I didn't feel okay, and things got really, really heavy for me in my life. When I grew up into a very mischievous kid and could not stay out of trouble, and God bless him, my dad, he didn't know how to handle me and didn't know what to do when I kept getting in trouble, and his way of dealing with it was to just beat the shit out of me. And I have made peace with that, and I love my dad, and I know that this is how he was done when he was a kid. And I don't want to paint him a picture of him as being a terrible guy, because he has plenty of great qualities. But I've started to live in fear and started to dread the sound of his vehicle, and the sight of him would make me real nervous. And my way of pleasing him and making him proud of me and making him happy was through sports. And so I was an athletic kid. I played basketball. I was good at it. I played baseball. I was good at it. I tried football. I was too skinny. I got my ass kicked in that really good. And I did all this looking for a pat on the back from my dad, because that made me feel good. And my best sport was tennis. And I had idols like John McEnroe, Bjorn Borg, Jimmy Connors, those dudes. And I was going to be like those guys. And I played in tournaments, and I beat everybody at my local tennis club. And I thought I was good. And so we decided, the Floyd family, to start playing me in tournaments and traveling to play tennis. And I learned real quick at that I wasn't that fucking good. I was just a regular dude, and there were other guys that were busting their asses and working, that had the same ideas that I did. And I think I was about 15 years old, and I lost in the first round of this big tournament. It was at Terminus Racket Club. It was an indoor tournament in Atlanta. And I got beat, and I remember on the ride home, my mom was driving, my dad was riding shotgun, I was in the back seat, and I remember my dad turned around and he said, "That's the last fucking penny I'm ever spending on you. Your tennis career is done. You can get a job. It's over with." And he just, whatever. So that's really the first time in my life, besides when I used to get whipped on pretty good, that I was literally crushed. And that feeling of just, it was the worst feeling that I've ever felt in my life. And that went away when alcohol entered the picture for me, like regular, like junior high drinking, and it made it better, and it made me forget about it. And my dad was a bail bondsman, still is a bail bondsman. And between my junior and senior year of high school, during the summer, he put me to work for him, and he told his night shift guy, who used to be a pimp. My dad hired 2 pimps and a taxi driver when he got into business in Atlanta. And this pimp that was running his night shift and had all these connections to the underworld in Atlanta, he was my mentor for a whole summer. The whole summer I would arrive at the office at like 10 o'clock, and I would go home at like 7 o'clock in the morning. And that was the first time I ever did cocaine. It was the first time I had lost my innocence to a prostitute. And the first time that ever happened, we smoked some cocaine together. And so you put all those factors in to this kid that was so already beaten down. I was broken. And that was my indoctrination into a world that I would live in and around for my entire life. And about this time, a friend of mine got me a birth certificate. I took the birth certificate, it was this easy back then, to the DMV, and I got a Georgia driver's license with someone else's name on it. And I was I was baby faced as it could get. And I was going to strip clubs. I was going to the Cheetah, and I would wear a suit to these places. And I also had started stealing money from my dad. He would routinely, at home on his dresser, have a stack like that. Like, that's how he felt powerful and successful, was to pull this big, huge wad out whenever he went anywhere to pay for whatever he bought. So when I had first tried the coke and the other things, and I felt justified in the way I had been done. I'm gonna get some of that, and I tested it. You know, he'd be outside, and I'd go in his bedroom. My mom would be, the coast would be clear, and I could take a couple hundreds, a few 50s, a few 20s, a couple 10s, 5s, 1s, and it never was noticed. Never. And this went on for a long time. And I started buying clothes, car stereos. If I wanted it, I got it. Nobody asked me where I got the money for it. And I became a regular cokehead while I was still in high school. I never had been to a prom, never been to a school dance. I was an awkward, shy kid. And some friends of mine from high school, they found out about how easy it was for me to take them to see the ladies of the evening, which I knew. I had serious knowledge of the ins and outs of it. Nobody messed with me, nobody robbed me. I was like a known dude to these people. And so I would get my boys from high school, they would be like, tonight, can Frankie come? Can so-and-so come? And we would hop in the Volkswagen Scirocco. That was like the whip back in the day. And I would broker these deals. We would all go into the little apartment, the little crappy little apartment. I would pay the man inside the apartment. My dudes would get taken care of. And all of a sudden at my school, I become this for the first time, I am the it guy with all the studs from the high school. And I don't know how I managed to graduate from high school. I was at this time in my life, I can't even really remember. I know I had to go to summer school, but I managed to graduate and went straight to work for my dad as a bail bondsman. And I've been doing it since 1985, officially since 1985, and started doing it, I've been around it all my life. And within the first year of me working for my dad, one of my friends from high school had come over to see if I was home. And I don't know exactly what transpired, but I came in really, really late one night and saw his car parked in my driveway. I came in the house and my mom and my dad and my friend were sitting at the kitchen table, and it looked like my mom had been crying. And my friend said, "Brent, they know everything." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "No, Brent, they know it. They know it all. I told them everything. I told them about the money. I told them about the drugs." And I was like, for just a second, I felt relieved, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to Like, I just want to be a young kid again and not have all this pressure on me. And my dad, he started crying, and he was like, son, I know that I've done a lot of stuff and I can't take it back, and I'm sorry. We have to get you better. Like, this scares me. This is about the time of like this high profile NBA kid had been drafted with the #1 pick in the NBA draft and then died of a cocaine overdose. And so, yeah, and my parents were like really, really, really like petrified that this was gonna happen to me. So, spent like the rest of the night like confessing to, he's like, how long you been taking my money? And I'm like, and how much would you take? And he's like, I remember my dad saying, damn, I wonder why I never had any fucking money. Like, and you can imagine the shame, you know, how this felt. So I still, just because we had that conversation, I'm not gonna do it anymore. I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, and I needed help. And kept on messing up, kept on sneaking out, doing what I did. And one day my dad said, you want to go to Home Depot with me and Mr. Norman? He was a next door neighbor. I was like, okay. And so we hopped in the car to go to Home Depot, and I thought it was weird that my dad was sitting in the back seat with me and Mr. Norman was driving, and I was thinking, we're not even near Home Depot. And it was a trip. It was a trip to the mental hospital. And it was just like a movie where the door shuts and all the crazy people like us with the bandages on their wrists are sitting around the table. They see the new person has been brought in. They see the door shut and they see the horror on my face. That was, I would say, about a month before the first white chip I ever picked up, and I want to say that was in 1986. And when I went into the hospital, the psychiatrist that was assigned to me, he put me on an antipsychotic medication that was some of the strongest, most debilitating stuff you can imagine taking. It made my vision blurry. It made my hands shake until they figured out another medication to give me to counteract the seizures that made me have seizures that I literally felt like I was gonna die. And I literally had no desire or energy to do anything. I'm a teenager and I'm ready to go to bed at 6 o'clock at night. I mean, I was made to keep on working for my dad while I was on that stuff. And I remember I would do this like all the time, and I remember my dad would he would make fun of me when I was doing that and like laugh at me. And I didn't know that, like, this is before you could like Google shit and figure out like what is this stuff for? Like, why am I taking this? Like, what is wrong with me? Other than the fact that I like to do coke, I like to smoke weed, I like to drink. If you got acid, I like to do that. I like to do anything to keep me from feeling these feelings that I have inside of me and feeling the way that I feel. And dealing already with this like terrible shame of this awful stuff that I've done. And so I was at a Cocaine Anonymous meeting at a Catholic church in Alpharetta, and this man, he drove a Porsche, of course, at a Cocaine Anonymous meeting. That's back in the 80s. I remember talking about that medication that I was on, and this guy, he was like, "You're taking what?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, he's like, "You don't need to be on that, man." He goes, "I can tell you right now, you need to quit taking that stuff. You're being put under someone's control, and you're being made into a zombie by that stuff." This dude at this meeting said that. And he's like, "Next time you have to take your medication," he goes, "just keep it in your mouth, man. Quit taking that shit." And I did what this guy told me to do. I kept telling my psychiatrist, I kept asking him, "Can we wean me off of that? Can we cut the dose a little bit?" He's like, "Okay." He's like, "I think you're ready." And like he told me, okay, so now we're just gonna take this, and rewrote a prescription. All the while he's doing that, I had quit taking it. So I got off of that shit, and it was like, I had gained all this weight. I had acne all over my face. I was a mess. Got off that medication, stayed off of cocaine, alcohol. I wanna say that I stayed sober for about a year, but it wasn't working the steps, working a program. It was fear of going back to the mental hospital that kept me sober. And I mean, I haven't even really grown up. And about the time I start to come into my own, I met the mother of my 3 kids, and we fell in love and we got married. I had never lived on my own before. I went straight from living with my parents to being married to a really cool girl. Talked to her tonight before I came here. And we had an incredible family. And I remember when I held my first baby in my arms, and I remember when I held him, I remember thinking, this little dude is never gonna be afraid of me. He's never gonna say shit when I come around. I'm never gonna make him feel that way. And I never did. And I'm an alcoholic and I'm an addict, and I'm easing back into things of the drugs and the alcohol while maintaining a 20-year marriage with a girl that pretty much treated me like her oldest son. She loved me and loved how much I love my kids and how much they love me. And I had all the freedom in the world to spend all the time with them that I wanted to. So I got to give my kids this childhood that I didn't get to have. And whenever I got the chance and got away for a little bit, I would still do drugs. I would still get wasted, but it wasn't around them very much. There were some incidences. I can remember taking my son to a Pee-wee basketball game, and being a bondsman, I was always dealing with drug dealers. And I remember this one dude gave me a bottle of this stuff called GHB. And he's like, just do a capful. That's all you want to do with this. And I thought it was a great idea at halftime of my son's basketball game to do some fucking GHB. Excuse my language. And I did the capful, and I can remember leaving this church, which was in Duluth, and there was literally one turn you had to make to get almost all the way to my house in Johns Creek. And I remember hearing my son say, Daddy, you're scaring me, you're scaring me. And I was like nodding in the car, and I was on Covington Highway. I don't know how the hell I got to it. I don't know any of that. But when you wonder, do you have a higher power? Is there really a higher power that looks out for me? That's my higher power, who let me be here. Maybe there's an alcoholic or an addict here tonight that can hear things that I have to say that did not let me kill myself and my son or someone else. After 20 years of marriage, and it was great, mostly untreated alcoholism and drug addiction, I had decided I deserve to be able to live the way I want to live, the way I was born to live. My sons are now old enough to where they have social lives. They got learner's permits, driver's licenses. My little girl is 14 years old. She's busy. I'm at home. My wife and I don't really have all that much common ground other than the fact that we have these kids together. I want to fucking party. That's not her style. That's not what she does. And I justified it all, and I sat my kids down and I said, I'm moving on. I'm going to get my own place. And they were tough, they were strong, but it was awful. When I look back on it, I'm like, how the fuck could you do that? But I did it. And I didn't ask for a single thing in the divorce. when I was paying child support and making the house payment on my house, I didn't have any fucking money to do anything except to feed myself and put a roof over my head and work out. And that's all I did. And I drank a little bit. And when I made my last child support payment, that's when my last serious drug binge began. And from about 2013 to July the 13th of 2018, I stayed up until about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week. I stayed in the East Atlanta Village bars. I did every drug you can do. I got terribly addicted to having to have drugs on me at all times. And every drug that I ever took, there was always liquor involved. Always liquor involved. The only liquids that ever went into my body were whiskey, beer, and coffee in the mornings. That was it. I'm not joking you. I don't know how I am alive today. I had a drug dealer that I could knock on his door at any hour of the day, and he answered, I think, every single time but one time. And he had everything that you wanted. And I would go in there, and I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. I was making cash. I was making a salary. I was throwing money away. And I would, for a whole summer, every stop that I made over at his house, I would get some mushrooms. I would get a big bag of Coke. I would get some Roxy's to come down off of. And I had a buddy tell me that he said, you're the closest thing that there'll ever be to a modern day Hunter S. Thompson. You are him. And I thought that was the fucking coolest thing in the world, to be that guy. And all this time, I'm a ghost from these precious kids that I love more than anything, whose faces are tattooed on my chest, whose names are all over me. I don't have much imagination when it comes to tattoos. I mean, I love these kids. My sons idolized me. They looked up to me and they loved me, and we did so much cool stuff, and I didn't have time for them. I got a son that moved in to live with me because he flunked out of school at Georgia Southern, and when he moved in to live with me, he became my number one party buddy. And I justified it and said, yeah, because I know where he is. I don't have to worry about him. He's with me, and I'm not going to let anything happen to him, so we'll do this shit together. And we did it, and he wound up having to go check himself in a detox. He's now doing great. He's in the Army. He's living in Italy. I talked to him tonight. I had ghosted the hell out of them. My children are worrying about me every night. And you guys know the lifestyle. And you know what happens to get you to the point where you're like, this isn't working anymore and I can't do it anymore. And for me, that happened July the 13th of 2018. I had a conversation with my little girl, and I think I detoxed for a few days before I went to my first meeting. And I went to the Complete Abandon group. One of their guys talked to me at a meeting in Edgewood. And I told him that I had never had a sponsor before, never worked a step before, and never been able to stay sober before. And he said, you want to go to a good meeting? And I said, yeah. And he goes, okay. He goes, come on, let's go. You're going to go to my home group with me. And he took me to it. And I went to this place for a month. And I showed up at 7 to 8, I talked to my sponsor. And I talked to people that my sponsor said, that guy's got good sobriety. Go talk to him. Go ask him if he can talk. An hour after the meeting, I talked to these dudes, walked the parking lot. And after a month of it, I rebelled against that. And because I was hearing from this one guy, I was like, I need a day off, man. I got some shit I want to do. I want to fix up my place, man. I got some stuff I want to do. He's like, no, you just want to go get fucked up. And I'm like, no, I don't. And he's like, yeah, you do. I'm like, take me fucking home. And he's like, nah, you're good. You're gonna be with us for the day. And so when that day was over with, I was like, fuck this, man. I'm done with these people. And I came into a softer AA, if you want to call it that, where we're all right now. But I will say this, without the boys from Complete Abandon, I would not be here tonight. I needed AA boot camp. I needed it. I mean, I did. If anybody ever needed it, it was me, because I would get sober for 30 days. Throughout my life, all these times in my life, there were 30-day stints in AA scattered amongst the years. And I never worked a step. And all of a sudden, I went to the Cabbagetown meeting one night, and one of my friends, Gary, he said, man, he's like, it's good to see you, man. He's like, we need to get you hooked up with Damon. And so he's like, Damon, do you know Brent? I don't know if Damon remembered me, but I had noticed Damon during one of my trying to save a relationship 30 days at AA. I had seen Damon here and I had heard him talk, and y'all know him. And when he would share, maybe the one or two times I heard him, I was like, this guy resonates with me, man. He's got that fucking dirty, gritty, Southern boy, streetwise flavor. And so Damon immediately said, yeah, man, let's talk. Tuesday night, we'll go to Bottom Feeders. We'll meet for coffee. We met, we went to the meeting, we talked, and he's like, yeah. He's like, here's what we'll do. We're gonna do it just like me and my sponsor did it. We're gonna go through the big book, we're gonna meet once a week, and when we come to a step, we'll work it. And Damon took me through the big book, and I regularly saw him and still see him, and he became a serious mentor to me. I've seen him do stuff for others selflessly. I had a cool old car. He loves cool old cars. He took an interest in it with me and went and found me a transmission. We got a transmission for it. Found all these parts that had to be customized for it. He spent a whole day on his back busting his butt to put a transmission in it for me. Took another couple of times. He had to take the drive shaft out of it, take it to a place, get a new tip put on it that would fit properly, get some cut off something. He did it all. He rode in it with me the first time the new transmission worked. And he was like real quick to deflect any praise about it, and me saying, I can't believe you did that for me. That's the nicest thing. He's like, whatever, it's cool. I'm glad to do it for you. And during this time of getting sober, working the steps with Damon, I have a whole new outlook on life. The things that I never thought were cool to do and the lifestyle to live. I'm here to tell you guys that I have never been happier in my life. I've never had a feeling like I have in my life. The feelings and the peace of mind and everything that the alcohol and the drugs, everything I thought they were giving me, being sober, having a sponsor, and working the steps trumps that exponentially. It's like I've met so many good people that are doing the same thing that you're doing, that can identify and relate to what it's like to feel like you're hopeless, to look in the mirror and just be like, again, I'm doing this again. Why am I always in this position? I said I would never do it again. And every time it's time to pay the rent and I'm looking, I'm like, I don't have it. And man, I don't live that way anymore. And it's so good. And it's like, I just can't say enough about what an honor it is to be here. And thank you very much.